They say a baby's first cry is a sign of life. Mine was a funeral bell. I took my first breath the moment my mother took her last. She died giving me life, and for that my father never forgave me. Growing up, I didn't know lullabies or bedtime stories. I knew silence. The kind of silence that feels like punishment, like the air is too thick to breathe because it's laced with blame. My siblings, especially Emily, the golden girl 5 years older than me, looked at me like I was a walking grave marker. My birth wasn't a celebration. It was a tragedy, and I wore it like a birthmark on my soul. I wasn't in baby photos. I wasn't in family portraits. My name wasn't etched on holiday cards or gift tags. I was raised in the attic, literally, because that's where they kept me once I turned 7. It wasn't just a spare room. It was the emotional broom closet where they swept me, hoping I'd vanish like dust. And for a while, I did. I became the ghost girl in my own house. I learned not to speak at dinner. I wasn't invited on vacations. If I needed something, I had to earn it. Not just with chores, but with silence, obedience, and invisibility. One Christmas when I was 10, I made a card for Emily. I had drawn the two of us holding hands, smiling under a tree. I left it on her bed, hoping, praying, for even a sliver of acknowledgement. The next morning, I found the card in the trash, torn in half, with the words, "You're not my sister," scrawled across it in red ink. After that, I stopped making cards. I stopped hoping to. I became my own parent, my own cheerleader, my own protector. I took care of myself. Learned how to fix leaky pipes, cook budget meals, sew my own clothes. When I turned 16, I got a job at the diner downtown. I lied about my age. Worked the night shift. Saved every penny. The day I graduated high school, alone, no family in the stands, I packed my bags and left. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. For the next 10 years, I carved out a life with my bare hands. I moved 3 states away, got my nursing license, and found a tiny apartment with chipped floors and a leaky faucet. But it was mine. And no one treated me like I was something they regretted. I even started volunteering at the local shelter, helping kids who were going through what I had. I never told them my story. Just offered warm meals, quiet hugs, and someone to listen. I wanted to be for them what no one had ever been for me. And I thought that part of my life, the part filled with rejection and bitterness, was over. Until last week. I was folding laundry, the TV humming softly in the background, when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something in my gut told me to answer. Is this Lily Hart? My breath caught. No one had called me by my full name in years. Not since I changed it after I left. Yes. Who's this? There was a pause. Then, in a voice I hadn't heard in over a decade, someone said, "It's Dad." My spine stiffened. My mind flooded with memories I'd tried to drown long ago. The attic. The silence. The card in the trash. "What do you want?" I asked flatly. "It's Emily," he said. She's sick." I stayed silent. "She needs a kidney," he continued. "We've all been tested. No matches. The doctors say you're the only hope." The only hope. Isn't that something? The girl they never acknowledged, never loved, never claimed. Now suddenly I mattered. I should have hung up. I should have laughed. Instead I said, "Send me the hospital details." Because revenge doesn't always come in the form of slamming doors or shouted curses. Sometimes revenge is showing up, not out of love but out of power. Sometimes revenge is making them face the humanity in you they tried so hard to erase. So now I'm going back. Not for them, but for me. Because the girl who grew up in the attic deserves to stand in the center of the room. And they're going to see me, really see me, for the first time. Even if it's through the haze of guilt and desperation. Even if they still refuse to say sorry. Because I'm not invisible anymore. I'm the answer they never saw coming. I didn't sleep the night before I flew out. Not because I was scared, but because I wasn't. And that terrified me. There should have been nerves. Hesitation. Maybe a little excitement at seeing my childhood home again after a decade. But all I felt was numb, like I was slipping into a costume I had burned years ago. The moment I landed, I took a cab straight to the hospital. Not a call. Not a welcome. They'd said they needed me, but not enough to greet me at the airport. When the hospital doors hissed open and the scent of bleach and desperation hit my nose, I paused. Everything in me screamed to turn back. To run. But then I remembered. This time I wasn't the one in need. They were. I walked to the reception. "Hi, I'm here to see Emily Hart. I was told she's on the transplant list." The nurse looked up from her computer, scanned me over and said, "You must be Lily. They're expecting you upstairs. Room 4B. I almost laughed. Expecting me. What a joke. I made my way up in the elevator, the hum and flicker of the fluorescent lights buzzing in rhythm with my heartbeat. With every floor we passed, I tried to piece together what I might say. Would I tell Emily I forgave her? Would I ask my father why he hated me so much? Would I finally scream? The elevator chimed. The doors opened. And there they were. My family. Frozen in time. Emily lay in the bed, pale and fragile, nothing like the golden girl I remembered. Her face was drawn, her eyes heavy. Her long blonde hair was gone, replaced with a beanie that barely covered the shadows of illness. Beside her stood my father. Grayer, older but still stone-faced. And next to him, my Aunt Karen. My mother's sister. The only person who had ever sent me a birthday card growing up. Though even she stopped once I moved away. "Lily," she breathed. My father didn't move. Emily slowly turned her head toward me. Her voice was raspy. "You came." I didn't answer. I walked in, set down my bag and crossed my arms. "I came because the doctor called." Pause. Awkward, thick silence. "Look," my father said, stepping forward. "I know things weren't ideal when you were younger." Weren't ideal. I cut in, eyes narrowed. "You locked me in an attic. You treated me like the plague. Emily told me I wasn't her sister. You..." My voice cracked, the pain surging after years of being buried deep. "You made me think my very existence was a curse." He flinched. "Good. Why am I here, really?" I said sharply. "Because now I'm your golden ticket? Your miracle solution? The piece of trash you threw away is suddenly valuable." Emily swallowed hard. "I didn't know you were the match, Lily. I didn't even think. We didn't think you'd ever come." "Well, you thought wrong," I snapped. They looked at me stunned. "But I'm here now," I continued. "And I'll get the tests done. Not because I care about what you think of me, but because I made peace with who I am a long time ago. I don't hold hate anymore, but I also don't forget." I stepped closer to Emily. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because I am better than what you all made me out to be. I'm not the stain you tried to scrub out of your family. I'm the only reason you might still be a family at all." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't respond. Because I wasn't ready to believe it yet. The doctor came in an hour later, ran my tests and confirmed it. I was the perfect match. "Your kidney could save her life," he said. The room fell quiet. All eyes turned to me. And for once I felt the power shift. My father stood up. "Lily, if there's anything we can do..." "Stop," I said. "You don't get to bargain now." I turned to the doctor. "When can we schedule the surgery?" "We can prep by tomorrow," he replied. "You're healthy." "She's weak, so sooner is better." "Fine," I said. "Let's do it." I didn't stay the night in the hospital. I found a cheap motel nearby, laid on the stiff mattress and stared at the ceiling. I thought I'd feel victorious, vindicated. But all I felt was tired. The little girl in the attic finally had her moment, but even she wasn't sure what it meant. The next morning I returned for pre-op. They prepped me quietly. Nurses moving around me with gentle hands and professional smiles. But my mind was a storm. Was I making the right choice? Would this change anything? Would they even remember me once Emily got better? Then just before they wheeled me into the OR, Emily reached out and grabbed my hand. "I never hated you," she said softly. "I was just scared because Dad always blamed you. And I thought if I loved you I'd lose his love too." I looked at her. "I lost everything," I whispered. And then they took me into surgery. As the anesthesia crept into my veins, the last thought I had was, they may have tried to erase me. But now I'm written into their survival. Forever. The hospital lights were dim when I woke up. My throat was dry and my side ached with a dull, throbbing pain. At first I thought it was all a dream. That the hospital, the family reunion, the kidney donation, it all felt too surreal, like a story someone else had lived. But then I moved, and the pain made it real. I turned my head slowly to the side. There across the room was a small bouquet of cheap flowers and a handwritten card that read, "Thank you, from all of us." No signature. Typical. The nurse checked on me every hour, but my family didn't. Not my father. Not Aunt Karen. Not even Emily. I'd just given a piece of my body to save my sister's life. And still, somehow, I was invisible. But that changed 2 days later. And it changed in the most ridiculous way possible. It started with a reporter. I was sipping ice water, trying to sit up in my hospital bed, when a woman in a black blazer knocked on my door. "Hi, are you Lily Hart?" she asked, peeking in. "From Everdale?" I nodded, confused. "I'm Jenna Lively. Local Channel 4. I'm covering this story about your donation. The doctors told me you were your estranged sister's only match and, well, once I heard the full story I had to meet you." Wait, what? Apparently, the hospital PR team had shared the transplant story with the press and it blew up. "A forgotten sister saves the favorite daughter's life" was just the kind of sensational headline that local news couldn't resist. And suddenly I was newsworthy. Not Emily. Not Dad. Me. Jenna smiled as she sat on the chair by my bed. "Do you mind if we interview you for a segment? It's just a short clip. Your story is powerful, especially given how your family treated you." My jaw tightened. "What do you know about how they treated me?" She hesitated. "Some nurses overheard a few things. There's been talk. We don't need to go into the ugly details unless you want to. But Lily, people are going to care." I'd never had anyone say that to me before. "People are going to care." I said yes. The next morning the segment aired. A grainy clip of me, pale but upright in my hospital bed, telling the world how I hadn't spoken to my family in over 10 years, and how I came anyway. Because I couldn't let hatred define me. They played it right before the evening weather forecast. And by morning it had gone viral. Not worldwide viral, but enough that my inbox exploded. Old high school friends I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me with shock. Strangers commented things like, "You are the definition of grace. They don't deserve you. Angel in disguise." And my family? They were livid. Dad stormed into my room 2 days later, his face red with fury. "You had no right to go public like that." "Excuse me," I said, raising an eyebrow. "I gave my kidney. I think I earned the right to say whatever I want." He glared. "You made us look like monsters." "You didn't need my help for that," I said flatly. That's when Emily entered the room, slower this time, her face pale but healing. "I asked the hospital to tell people what happened," she confessed. "I didn't know it would go this far." My dad whipped around. "You what?" Emily winced. "Dad, she saved my life. Maybe it's time people knew what we did." The room went quiet. And for the first time in my life, someone chose me over him. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a reckoning. That same afternoon, a representative from a major TV show reached out. They wanted to do a full interview. A feature on forgotten family members who returned in their family's time of need. They wanted me. Not them. Not Emily. Just me. And suddenly, the family that had buried me alive was scrambling to appear beside me. "Let's do a group segment," Aunt Karen suggested. "We should show we're reunited," Emily offered. My father even had the audacity to say, "We'll look stronger if we're together." I smiled politely and told the network I'd go on alone. But the biggest twist of all came a week later, when a lawyer knocked on my hospital door. "Lily Hart?" he asked. "Yes." He handed me a manila envelope. "I represent your late grandmother's estate. You were mentioned in a confidential codicil that no one knew about. Her last will was contested, but this was sealed." I blinked. "My grandmother's estate?" He nodded. "You're the sole beneficiary of a trust fund set up specifically for the grandchild who demonstrated the most compassion. She instructed it be opened only if one of her heirs willingly saved another in a life-or-death situation." He smiled. It looks like that's you. The number? Over $5 million. More than enough to start a new life. More than enough to remind them. The daughter they tried to erase just inherited the legacy they thought was theirs. Emily visited me that night. She didn't ask about the will. She just sat beside me silent, her hand nervously twisting a hospital bracelet. I know it doesn't fix what happened, she whispered, but I meant it when I said I was sorry. I nodded slowly. I know. I just want to be your sister again. My chest ached. Not from surgery, but from the part of me that still longed for a family. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because there was still so much to unfold. So many secrets still buried under that family name. And tomorrow the world would know all of it. I never imagined I'd see my father's hands trembling. But there they were, calloused, strong hands that once slapped the dinner table when I dared to speak my truth. Now wringing like wet laundry as he stood in my hospital room, hat in hand. He looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had grown. Maybe the girl they called adopted trash had finally become something he couldn't control. Lily, please, he said, eyes darting toward the door to make sure no cameras were nearby. The press is digging too deep. There are things they can't find out. I cocked my head. Like what? That you threw me out at 16? That you lied to everyone and told them I ran off with some guy? Or is it the fact that Emily bullied me so badly I tried to end my own life in sophomore year and you told the school to keep it in the family? He flinched. Aunt Karen, seated on the couch, spoke up next. We were all scared, Lily. Your mother's death, it shattered us. Don't you dare, I said, voice sharp as a blade. Don't you even bring Mom into this. She died protecting me. You all tried to erase me the second she was gone. A heavy silence followed. No one moved. But then Emily stood. And when she spoke, her voice cracked like thin ice. I remember Mom's funeral, she whispered. I was 10. You were 13. You held my hand even though we weren't speaking. And I remember Dad pulling you aside and telling you not to cry. He swallowed. He said crying made you look weak. My throat tightened. She looked at me then, eyes glassy. I knew what they were doing. I let it happen. I'm sorry. I wanted to scream at her. But I also saw the weight she was carrying now. She had nearly died. Her eyes weren't just pleading for forgiveness. They were pleading for something more. Redemption. I didn't know if I could give it. But I also knew the cameras were still rolling. Literally. Channel 4 had requested to do a follow-up, and this time they brought a crew to the house where I was recovering. I had agreed on one condition: full creative control. They would tell my story exactly how I said it. No spin. No edits. And they agreed. So here I was, sitting in the old family living room, same couch, same dusty fireplace. Only this time I was at the head of the table. And they all knew it. The producers mic'd me up, then Emily, then Dad. Karen refused to go on camera but stayed in the background, fussing with a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. Lily, the interviewer began, it's been 2 weeks since your surgery. How are you feeling now? Physically? Healing, I said. Emotionally? Still raw. The room tensed. The camera panned to Emily, who reached over and touched my hand gently. She didn't have to save me, she said, voice soft. But she did. And I'll never stop trying to earn that. Cue the tears. Cue the perfect moment. But I wasn't done. Growing up, I said, looking straight at the camera, I was the black sheep. The mistake. The daughter they claimed wasn't theirs. I remember nights crying myself to sleep because I believed I was unlovable. But I learned something. I paused. They only want you when they need something. Dad shifted uncomfortably. But you know what? I don't need their validation anymore, I said, eyes burning. I didn't save Emily to be accepted. I did it because that's who I am. And no one gets to take that from me. The crew wrapped up an hour later. As they left, I caught the producer mouthing, wow. It wasn't just a story now. It was a movement. I wasn't a cautionary tale, I was a symbol. And people noticed. My social media exploded. I started getting offers. A book deal, a podcast appearance, even a TEDx talk invite titled, How It Feels to Be Erased by the People Who Raised You. The girl they ignored was now the woman everyone wanted to hear from. But beneath the glow of attention, something darker lurked. Because Dad's sudden interest in reconciliation had nothing to do with guilt. It had to do with exposure. I got a call from Jenna Lively again, the same reporter who first broke my story. "Lily," she said, her voice laced with urgency, "there's something you should know." "What is it?" "Your family's finances. We pulled records for background. Your dad took out a reverse mortgage on the family home years ago. The estate's in foreclosure. If that story gets out, they'll be ruined." I leaned back, letting the truth settle. So that's why he was groveling. Not for me. For the house. The house I was born in. The house they kicked me out of. The house they now wanted me to help save, because they couldn't survive without it. And I smiled. Because I had a choice to make. Not just about forgiveness, but about justice. I stood in the doorway of the old living room, the one I was thrown out of like yesterday's garbage, watching my family squirm on the worn leather couch that had once been off-limits to the adopted one. Funny how desperation makes people humble. "I'm not signing anything," I said flatly, folding the crisp manila envelope in half and setting it on the coffee table. Inside was the offer Dad had given me. Co-sign a loan to save the house or watch the family home go into foreclosure. No apology. No real conversation. Just business like I was a bank and not a daughter. "Lily, this house is all we have left," Aunt Karen said, finally breaking her silence. "Your grandparents built this place with their bare hands." "Oh, you mean those grandparents?" I replied coldly. "The ones who told me not to sit at the real family table at Thanksgiving?" Karen's face paled. "Don't do this," Emily pleaded. "Not because of them. Do it for me. For what we've started to rebuild." I didn't answer her. Instead, I reached for my phone and tapped a few buttons. A voice memo started playing. "Just get her signature. She's desperate for attention anyway." Dad's voice. Crystal clear. Recorded just 2 nights ago when he thought I was asleep upstairs. "Once she signs, we'll transfer everything back to Emily and kick her out again. She won't fight it. She never does." Karen gasped. Emily's hands flew to her mouth. And Dad, his eyes burned with fury. "You recorded me?" he spat. "Oh, I did more than record you," I replied, cool and steady. "I sent this audio to Jenna Lively. And tomorrow morning it'll be airing live on her segment." "No. Lily, wait." Emily rushed forward, grabbing my arm. "I had no idea. I swear on my life." I looked her in the eye. And for the first time I saw it. Genuine horror. Maybe she hadn't known. Maybe she really was trying to make amends. "I believe you," I said softly. "But you also stood by when they buried me the first time." Emily's lip trembled. "I'm not signing anything," I said again. "But I am giving you something." I walked over to the family portrait that still hung above the mantel. The one taken when I was 12, the year they started pretending I didn't exist. I pulled it down, flipped it over, and slipped something out from the back. A faded letter. My mother's handwriting. Her last note to me, hidden there all these years. "You are not trash, Lily. You're my whole world. And one day they'll realize you were the light we all needed." I read it aloud. By the time I finished, no one could look me in the eye. Then I turned to face them one last time. "You all erased me," I said. "But the world remembers now. They see me. They hear me. And guess what? I don't need this house. I already built my own home, with truth, with strength, and with love from people who didn't need DNA to believe in me." I dropped the letter on the table and walked out. The next morning, Jenna's broadcast went viral. She didn't just air the recording. She aired everything. The abuse. The gaslighting. The betrayal. The way they came crawling back only when they needed something from me. She even read the letter from my mother on air, her voice trembling as she said the final line. "One day they'll realize you were the light we all needed." By noon, #Justice for Lily was trending on every major platform. And then the emails started pouring in. Women from all over the country wrote to me, telling me how they were cast out by their own families. How they were erased, mistreated, then summoned like servants when the family needed a signature, a kidney, a check. One woman wrote, "You saved your sister's life, and your own soul in the process. You gave me the courage to say no to people who only call when it benefits them. That night I sat in my new apartment, quiet, clean, and finally mine, and recorded a video. I lit a candle, set the phone on a stand, looked right into the lens. Hi. My name is Lily. You've heard my story by now. You've seen the headlines. But I want you to know something. I paused, voice steady. You are not your family's scapegoat. You are not their doormat. You are not trash just because they say you are. Tears welled in my eyes, but they didn't fall. You are allowed to walk away. Even when they beg. Even when they say they've changed. You're allowed to save yourself first. I hit upload. Within an hour it had 500,000 views. People weren't just watching. They were waking up. The video didn't just go viral. It exploded. Overnight I became the face of something bigger than myself. People called me brave, fierce, resilient. Words I never thought I'd hear after being treated like I was disposable for most of my life. But the truth? I was still reeling. I was free, but freedom comes with echoes. And those echoes had names. Dad, Karen, and yes, even Emily. Despite it all, I never stopped loving my sister. But love doesn't mean returning to the people who held the knife. It means healing the wound and keeping the blade out of reach. The day after the video hit 1 million views, I got an invitation I never expected. We'd like to feature you at our upcoming Empower Her Summit in Chicago. The email was from a producer at Bold Voice Media, a network that spotlighted stories of women rising from abuse, abandonment, and adversity. They didn't just want me to speak. They wanted me to headline. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes before whispering, "Mom, they're listening now." The summit was electric. I stood under hot lights in front of hundreds of women and spoke my story, not just the betrayal but the resilience. Not just what they did to me but how I built back stronger. Every time the audience gasped, I felt another brick fall off my chest. But the biggest moment came during the Q&A. A woman with gray-streaked hair raised her hand. "What would you say," she asked, "if your family watched this right now?" I paused. And then I said what I needed to say. If you're watching, know this. I am not the scared little girl anymore. I am not the backup plan. I am not your donor, your co-signer, your fixer, or your secret keeper. I am a daughter. I was a sister. And I will always be someone worth loving, whether you see it or not. The room erupted. That clip alone reached 10 million views in 48 hours. Then came the twist I never saw coming. A letter. Hand-delivered. It wasn't from Dad. It was from my late mother's lawyer. Turns out, Mom had left something for me in a sealed secondary will. One that she'd instructed to be delivered only if the family ever came to me in desperation. It had remained unopened for 18 years. Inside was a handwritten letter, and a deed. To the lake house. Not the family home they tried to save. A completely separate property. A hidden asset my mother purchased secretly in my name before she died. A place she said would be my refuge should they ever forget who you are. I sobbed for hours. Not because of the property, but because she knew. All those years ago she knew the battles I'd face. And she made sure I'd have something they couldn't touch. I drove to that lake house a week later. It was run down, but the view was breathtaking. And for the first time in forever I felt peace. I renovated it. Slowly. Painfully. With my own hands and with friends I met through the Empower Her community. I turned it into a retreat for women like me. Survivors. Silenced daughters. Forgotten sisters. We called it the Rising House. By spring we had a waiting list. By summer we were featured in Good Morning America. By fall, we had launched a foundation. And then, out of the blue, Emily showed up. I was out planting a tree in the front garden when I heard her voice. "Kiki. Lily." I turned. She looked thinner. Tired. Not in a tragic way, just in that way you get when guilt and time take their toll. "I know I don't deserve anything," she said. "But I saw what you're doing. And I wanted to say thank you. For saving my life. For not destroying ours even when you could have." I didn't speak for a moment. And then I gestured for her to sit on the porch swing. We talked for hours. She told me she'd left Dad and Karen after everything went public. That she'd started therapy. That she was trying, really trying, to be someone different. Someone better. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. But if you ever need help with the foundation, I'd love to volunteer. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no. And that was enough. So now here I am 1 year later. In the house my mother left me. Living the life I built from ashes. Helping women rise from silence into strength. And as I sit by the fire reading letters from women who say I gave them the courage to walk away, to speak up, to fight back, I finally understand what Mom meant when she said, "You are the light they'll one day need." Because I didn't just light my own path. I became the torch for others. And if you're reading this, watching this, crying through this, let me say it clearly. You are not alone. You are not their shame. You are not too broken to bloom. You're just getting started. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. New emotional episodes drop every single day. Join the movement. You are not alone.